Warm round of applause. Kia ora.
Thank you very much for that speedy introduction. Kia ora koutou katoa. This isn't a COVID-19 announcement today, which I'm sure is just as pleasing for you as it is for me. Look, I was really pleased to get most of that panel discussion. What an incredible panel, what a rich discussion, and I had to write down some notes, and I'll try and drop a couple of those into the comments I'm going to make. I look a bit younger then. That was just after I'd started as Director General of Health, BC, before COVID. Although I dare say once I finished up in the role, my wife, within about a week, was saying, "You look 5 years younger." So she was pretty happy. She not only got her husband back, I think she's still okay about that, but she got a younger husband back. So that was quite good. Anyway, thanks so much for the opportunity to contribute today, and I'm sorry I haven't been able to be here until the panel discussion. I want to preface my comments with a disclaimer. I am not primarily a researcher, although I've been involved with research through my career, and increasingly, of course, am involved in research now. I'm a professor at the University of Auckland trying to work out what a professor is supposed to do. But I do understand the value of research, how it is undertaken, what its limitations are. And for most of my career, I have been known as what is affectionately known as an end user, as a public servant. The latter, of course, perhaps less affectionately known as a bureaucrat. But I'm mostly interested in translating research into action, including through its effective communication, to increase awareness, knowledge, understanding, and thinking on issues. I recently learnt a lot about how to do this with speed and, I hope, with some agility during the COVID-19 pandemic. My default position on research is that all research should have the potential to have a public impact if it is publicly funded or being undertaken in largely publicly funded institutions. And if there is no impact, then we should be asking ourselves whether it should be being undertaken. If it doesn't add to our understanding or knowledge about a topic, or if the outcomes are not accessible to communities, iwi, decision makers, stakeholders, including the private sector, then it doesn't create public value. It might be highly cited in a high impact journal, but doesn't mean it's accessible. So the work I'm involved in, one of the things at the university is helping establish an Institute for Public Impact. We're trying to work on this particular area. So 3 thoughts I want to share on research in the future, remembering, of course, that the future is now. We often just don't recognise it. The thoughts are interrelated, so maybe I'm just sharing one thought, in which case I hope it's a useful one. The first is I think there's a pressing need for a different kind of research in future that sees researchers, policymakers, and what I'll call implementers working much more closely together in a sort of a symbiotic relationship over time. This is what happened. Indeed, it had to happen through COVID. The key drivers were high levels of uncertainty, the need to develop the research and evidence base on the fly, and the imperative to constantly review and learn and adjust, almost on a daily basis, sometimes more than once a day. The public service parlance for this is agility, or learning it forward, otherwise known as making it up as you go along. The point here is that we may no longer be in a global pandemic, but if anyone thinks the world is less VUCA, volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous, that is not the case. And the list of wicked problems is getting longer, not shorter. Climate change is upon us, or the impacts of it, extreme weather events. Likewise, we are seeing, as was discussed by the panel just before, a digital revolution that is entering a whole new phase, not just of digital progress, but of human progress. And COVID showed us that a learn quickly as you go approach is not only essential, but with excellent values-based leadership, strong partnerships between researchers, communities, and decision makers, you can get a very good outcome, even in the most challenging of circumstances. Just as an aside, I'm not a fan of this pernicious failure narrative, which the media seems addicted to. Everything that doesn't go perfectly is a failure, and anything that's a challenge is a crisis. And there's this associated term, fail fast. Actually, it's not fail fast, it's learn fast. And our research in the future needs to be much more agile so we can learn fast. The only failure is if we don't learn, we don't review and learn and adjust. So we need new ways of undertaking research that are embedded alongside those implementing research findings. And this is different from evaluation, which in my humble experience as an end user tends to be undertaken over too long a period to usefully inform adjustments in policy or in policy implementation. Sometimes you're implementing a policy, it's been based on a pilot study, the evidence is great, and 3 months into its rollout you realise, oh, it's not quite happening as we thought it should. And your evaluation comes in 3 years later and tells you exactly that. What we need to be able to do is do research in parallel so that we can adjust as we go. Okay, second point. I've learnt over the last year that there's this thing called transdisciplinary research. It's a hot topic, it's a thing. Noting that this, of course, is not the same as multi or interdisciplinary research, one of the things I've been instructed on. Now, I'm no expert in transdisciplinary research, but it seems to me it is fundamentally characterised by actively involving those being researched or using the results of the research in the end-to-end research process and helping to define the research question, determine how the research is undertaken, undertaking the research, interpreting the findings, and most importantly, doing something with the findings. If that is what transdisciplinary research is, not just the emperor's new clothes, then I think that's excellent and an essential development that we should embrace, and I think the University of Auckland is an organisation that is doing that. Although I dare say it sounds incredibly challenging, and I expect it will be quite the learning journey. There's no reason why Aotearoa, though, can't be world-leading in this regard, and we should aspire to be so. My third and final thought, and this again, this one does build on the earlier discussion, we need to proactively harness the opportunity afforded by generative artificial intelligence in making research more efficient, equitable, and impactful. Another thing, I'm not an expert in AI, but I've been talking recently with health sector colleagues, and Wayne and I were just talking about this during the break. The potential for the health system of even basic AI tools is enormous to both reduce the cognitive and administrative burden of people working in the system and make their work more rewarding and joyful. There is no system that is more complex than the health system that humankind has designed. And as Michael was saying in the panel discussion, we're not very good with complexity. Imagine if we can partner with AI to actually deal with that complexity, deal with the really basic administrative stuff in health and in research. We could be undertaking research much more dynamically, much more speedily, and have a much greater impact. Now, I recognise that the pace with which AI is developing does provide some causes for concern. It feels like it's at risk of being a values-free ecosystem, just as most social media has transpired to be. And the pace with which it is developing is well ahead of appropriate regulation and oversight by governments. But I think that in Aotearoa, New Zealand, we could get our act together on this and harness it in the quest to undertake more research with the funding available, do it more quickly and potentially more enjoyably. Which links back to my first 2 points. So it only remains for me now to thank you all for your incredible mahi in this important kaupapa over many years. As this phase of Better Start venture comes to a close, it is a good opportunity to consider how we ensure an even greater future impact from the work you have done to date and the future work you will be engaged in. Ngā mihi nui.